these are technology financial giants, corporate giants. And if Fortune 500 picks a chain, they're picking Hedera. That alone says enough. And, I should be paying attention to this asset.
So, Greg, we've seen that you're making the rounds. We've seen you on various media outlets out there spreading the good word about Hedera and the HBAR. We appreciate you coming on here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. There's a lot to talk about in the ecosystem. And so, part of our job is to amplify the awareness and happy to do so. It's a lot of fun.
Well, hopefully we can do that a little bit today. So a couple weeks ago, Greg, just to jump right into it, the SEC requested comments from the public on the Canary Capital HBAR ETF. From your perspective, how's the process going and what are your expectations around approval and launch?
Gosh, I think the process has been one that is following a sort of well-trodden path, right? And we've all seen what that path looked like for Bitcoin. I know some of your prior, interviewees, the team from Bloomberg, right, Eric and James, who provide some fantastic updates on the overall process. But we now have the two filings, the S1s, one from Canary, one from Grayscale. The 19B4 was filed back in February. And then there's been, acknowledgement of that 19B4. It sort of follows this train track. Once the acknowledgement occurs, there's a final deadline, I believe, for the Canary filing, which was the first. It's into November of this year. And they put out the odds. So, of what I've seen was most recent odds at approval within the calendar year of 90% or greater. And so, that looks quite promising. I think you add to that some of the attributes around the way that, there are CFTC regulated futures. They have a column that says, does the SEC currently view as commodity? Likely yes. And so I think those are all leading in the right direction. And then we saw, January 6th, VanEck, 21 shares in Canary, they jointly sent a letter to the SEC. It was sent to, Chairman Paul Atkins. And it was urging them to return to this, decades-long process of first to file, first to approval. And I think that's very beneficial for Hedera and for HBAR because of the fact that the Canary filing was so early in the overall adoption of ETF filings. And so, if there is a change of the way that the Bitcoin was approved, where everything was done simultaneously, this would be reverting back to that norm. That letter was signed by John VanEck, by the CEO of VanEck, by Stephen McClurg, the CEO of Canary, and by Duncan Muir, president of 21 Shares. And of course, Duncan was previously at Aberdeen, so one of the governing council members and knows the Hedera ecosystem better than most. I think it's really promising and exciting, and there's increased momentum. So I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, we heard great things from Duncan about how there is people asking about the HBAR ETF, and that's why they actually moved forward with bringing that to market. Now, I was speaking to the issuer of the first international HBAR-backed ETP, Valor, a few weeks ago. I hadn't looked in a while, but I was pleasantly surprised that their HBAR-backed products now have 8 figures in assets under management. As we mentioned, 21 Shares is going to be launching a similar product, but the U.S. products could be even more impactful. What are your thoughts on potential inflows that could result from these products?
Valor was a true pioneer in the space in terms of finding the geographic locations throughout the world that were able to onboard ETPs and did so very, very early. And they did so on a regional exchange that maybe is lesser known. And so, they've been growing, which is fantastic, of course, to see. I think there's going to be more and more regional distribution channels of various securities markets and exchanges. And, that will grow beyond the German market where many of the ETPs are today. And of course, the ETP is sort of the European version of the US ETF product. And so I would expect to see cross listings. I'd expect to see these assets become available in some of the jurisdictions that just are harder to gain access to, or those that simply can't access US markets or European markets. And so in the Middle East, in Dubai, and pockets in Latam and Asia and throughout Europe. And so there is certainly opportunity to speak to captivated smaller markets. And, these ETPs, I think, are really efficient to gain access to HBAR without having to worry about the custody requirements and other components and knowledge related to the cryptocurrency ecosystem. You can just go directly through your broker or buy these assets with legacy rails. And so I'm quite favorable in terms of the adoption flows that will happen as they become more and more options for investors. The US, of course, is the biggest, right? And so the US has multiples in terms of the capital. And so as the US comes on board, it also drives awareness. Like part of it is accessibility, and then part of it is awareness. And so I think there will be a big marketing component as these products become available in the US.
Fantastic point. Now, as we've discussed in the past, basketed crypto ETFs have tremendous potential as well. And with HBAR being considered what they say a US crypto, because there's a lot of our entities that are focused here, we're also a top 25 token or a layer one. And with this likely standalone ETF, it would seem to be primed to be included in many of these indexed products. What are your thoughts on the potential impact of these basketed type ETFs?
Well, it's already, I mean, to your point, it's already included in these basket type products in the crypto space. Mm-hmm. And so there's no reason to believe that there won't be, Hedera inclusion within ETFs as the basket products come to market. And I do think they're compelling, right? I mean, the percentage of the overall market that utilizes ETFs for tracking bond indices, the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100 is significant. Last I checked is something around 15% of the market, I think, is through these. And similarly, Bitcoin, we've got the Bitcoin ETFs. Those, I think, are around 6% of the overall market cap is now being held in the ETF products. And so I think that there's several different narratives that are beneficial. So if you're constructing a US basket, or you're constructing a top 20 basket, or you're constructing a basket that is specific to financial infrastructure or tokenization, Hedera fits very well within a lot of these narratives. And that's where passive investing, index investing really has been something that for the last generation or two, you've seen more and more inflows. And so that certainly is a benefit.
Well, one of the things that, I've been looking at is the fact that Bitcoin has had that tailwind of having those ETFs in the market for some time. And I think that can attribute some of the outperformance of Bitcoin. Now, we've had the ETH ETFs in the market as well, but I think ETH has had some other issues it's been contending with. Do you think that these altcoins that are going to be getting the ETFs, do you think they're going to be lackluster, or do you think that there is demand for those type of products?
I think there's absolutely demand. And a lot of it comes around the narratives, right? I mean, Ethereum has had scaling challenges that have been these scaling debates for a variety number of years now. And that's why you see a whole bunch of different altcoins that have come and said, all right, we specialize in scalability. Well, Hedera have proven scalability rather than just saying it, right? And so I think that there is the technology narrative that you can look at Hedera and say, all right, it's the greenest. It has, fixed and affordable fee structure. It has the throughput that is required from its institutions. It has the proven scalability. And then you compound that with the brands that ultimately operate Hedera. And these are brands that a whole generation of people are familiar with that may be new to crypto, but if they're trying to gain exposure and they're sitting there and saying, well, I can get exposure to something that I really don't understand over here, or I can gain exposure to the protocol that is being run by Google and IBM and Nomura and Aberdeen, Mondelez and Dell. Okay, these are technology financial giants, corporate giants. And if Fortune 500 picks a chain, they're picking Hedera, that alone says enough. And, I should be paying attention to this asset. And so I think that there is a lot of positive momentum when it comes to the Hedera story.
And I think that a lot of the investors that are going to be gaining access through these kind of products, they're used to doing research. And as they go down that rabbit hole, they're going to find things like the Carnegie Mellon COQ proof that was done for the ABFT security on Hedera, or the University College London study that found that Hedera, like you mentioned, is the greenest on earth. And then, of course, going down the rabbit hole of the council itself and how they're involved in the things that they're building. I think that's a good path for those people that might be a little... Go ahead.
It fits within, a technology vertical that already exists with a lot of traditional asset managers and advisors that are making allocation decisions for their clients.
Well said, and well covered. So, Greg, we know that you're not just focused on ETFs there at the foundation. What else has you excited?
Gosh, well, ETFs, ETPs really are just taking a digital asset and wrapping it in the traditional format. That's one direction. The other direction is tokenization, taking securities and bringing them on chain, and that is an area that there is massive growth. If you believe, as I do, the way Larry Fink is saying, everything in the world is going to be tokenized from a financial products perspective. There are certain protocols and certain needs that institutions require to be able to really adopt new technology. They need the scalability. They need the uptime. They need to have the ability to budget accordingly. Like, fees for transactions and securities can't be subject to 2,000% changes over any given moment because of a transaction or volumes that are occurring on the other side of the world, because there's a meme coin drop or an NFT that's really gaining excitement, and now there's congestion that also correlates with downtime. So it's the scalability, and then the collateral mobility story is one that is a lot of people are talking about, that also relies on sort of the throughput of the network. So there's a whole bunch of different components. When you add to that the regulatory compliance, the fact that Hedera is OFAC or sanctions compliant, that removes a whole nother risk factor that an institution has to overcome in order to say, I'm going to utilize this technology. Because corporate risk that everybody is taking on here, that says, all right, am I going to enable this technology or not? And the more that you can, check the right boxes, the easier that adoption is. And so there's lots of those conversations ongoing. There's lots of tokenization that I will expect to see, and more innovation. So it's not just, hey, this is a new distribution avenue, but here's something that can be done by embedding a smart contract to create automation, to create more efficient markets, to create higher yields, less risk to the underlying system, greater transparency. All that's coming, and that's to me really exciting.
Well, it's following the progression that I would expect. We had the initial proof of concepts around, NFTs or just straight up DeFi and DEXs, and that moved to commodities exchanges. We had Verto and the Digital Commodities Exchange, both built on Hedera. And now we're seeing KDX, the Kenyan Digital Exchange. Of course, that's going to take some time to come to fruition, but that's one of the Hedera governing council members, the Nairobi Securities Exchange, which is actually doing that. But it's following that progression that you would expect to eventually have the proof of concept for the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ and the Texas Stock Exchange, the FTSE and so forth. So, when I look at Hedera, I like the path that we're going down, becoming those new financial rails for pretty much everything in the traditional financial space.
There is a world of opportunity. We're only scratching the surface.
Well said. Greg, is there anything else you'd like to cover before we let you go?
Gosh, we could keep on talking for hours. We didn't even talk about AI, and to me, that's one of the biggest, most exciting areas. Do
it up. Absolutely.
You get to robo advisors being able to utilize now the ELIZA OS plugin, which is one of the core operating systems for AI. And so Hedera plugins exist for ELIZA OS, and so that's more of the progression from Talk to Me, which is the way most people interact with AI today, right? Whether it's through ChatGPT or otherwise, or a prompt, an LLM, communicating, it's Talk to Me. Maybe that's by X or some other platform, but it's moving from talk to me to do this for me, buy this for me, generate this for me. That requires these operating systems that can actually connect, and then the rails by which the operating systems will ultimately execute. It's a different advertising campaign. You're not advertising to an individual saying, hey, utilize this because the brand is there. No, an operating system will look and see what is the uptime, what is the cheapest cost, what's the fastest throughput. Though that's a ground of a battle that Hedera will perform extremely well on, all those metrics. So it's exciting.
Yeah, the agents aren't gonna have those crypto biases that we see all the time in the space, the tribalism, all that kind of stuff. They're just gonna say, what is the platform that's best for what I need to do?
And as more of the crypto exchanges start to engage in securities, which they all are seeking to, follow the models of many of the broker dealers in the US that have now, both crypto and securities, only going to further move the needle in terms of the adoption.
Couldn't agree more, Greg. We appreciate you taking the time to come on here today. And I know you're working on a lot of different things. So as you get more things going, you move down your roadmap, you're always welcome back.
Appreciate it.
I'm now posting these interviews of Hedera builders independently to my channel. The community, influencers, and media outlets are free to use this content to spread the word on what's being built on Hedera. Once they're all uploaded, you'll be able to go to my channel and search for whatever topic or team you're interested in to find more information. Or you'll be able to get the most recent Hedera news by watching the latest HBAR Weekly update. So check them out.